At my promotion party, my parents smiled and said, "We already spent your first 3 paychecks." My boss frowned and said, "That's a shame, because I just voided your family's access to your accounts." The rooftop restaurant in downtown Chicago was packed, the glow of the city casting a golden hue over the celebration. My promotion to vice president of financial strategy had been years in the making, long nights at the office, skipped holidays, sacrifices that only I seemed to understand. And now, here I was, standing in a room filled with people who were all here because of me. The table was covered in half-empty glasses, fancy appetizers barely touched. Laughter and conversation filled the air. My boss, Martin Holt, a man who rarely smiled, had just raised a glass in my honor. I should have felt on top of the world. Instead, something gnawed at the back of my mind. A tension I couldn't place. My mom, Sheila, was practically glowing. She wore the pearl necklace she only took out for special occasions, her auburn hair styled perfectly, her makeup flawless. My dad, Raymond, was on his 3rd drink, his deep-set eyes scanning the crowd as he talked too loudly about how proud he was of me. My younger brother, Zach, slouched in his chair, absently scrolling through his phone. I'd been the one to invite them. It felt like the right thing to do. After all, they were my family. But as I stood there, sipping expensive champagne and listening to my father tell a group of my coworkers about how he'd always known I had it in me, I felt something shift. Something I couldn't quite name yet. And then my mother turned to me, her voice light, casual, as if she was telling me something as simple as passing the salt. "We already spent your first 3 paychecks." I blinked, sure I had misheard her over the noise of the restaurant. She smiled at me, the same warm, reassuring smile she had used my entire life, as if she was doing me a favor. My dad chuckled beside her, raising his glass in a silent toast. I forced a laugh, waiting for the punchline. "Nice one, Mom." Her expression didn't change. "We're serious, honey." The glass in my hand felt suddenly heavy. "What do you mean? You gave us access to your account, remember?" she said, tilting her head like I was the one being unreasonable. It was just sitting there, and, well, we had some things we needed to take care of. Something cold crawled up my spine. I had given them access once, years ago, when I was still in college. Back then, they were struggling, and I was barely making ends meet. But I never thought they would actually. Martin's voice cut through the moment, sharp and precise. "That's a shame," he said, setting his glass down on the table. "Because I just voided your family's access to your accounts." Silence. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. The conversations around us faded into white noise. My dad's expression darkened. My mother's lips parted slightly, as if she had been slapped. "You what?" my dad said slowly, his voice low, dangerous. "You heard me," Martin said, leaning back in his chair. "Lucas worked too hard to have his success stolen." My mother's face twisted in something between disbelief and indignation. "Stolen?" she repeated, shaking her head. "We are his family." Martin shrugged, unimpressed. "And families are supposed to support each other, do not drain each other dry." I barely heard them. My heart was pounding so loudly in my chest I could feel it in my ears. I turned to my mother. "How much?" She laughed nervously. "Oh, come on. It's not, how much?" I asked again, my voice steady, controlled. My dad scoffed. My mother looked away. It was Zach who finally answered, not even bothering to look up from his phone. "About 20 grand. I stopped breathing for a moment. I had expected a number. I had braced myself for something bad. But $20,000? I stared at them. My mother sighed, as if I was being unreasonable. "It wasn't just for us," she said quickly. "Your father had some medical bills, and Zach needed a car, and the casino, Mom?" Zach muttered. Her head snapped toward him. "Zach, shut up." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "You spent my money gambling?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My mother inhaled sharply. "It's not." I turned to my father, waiting for some kind of explanation. Some kind of regret. He met my gaze without flinching. "We took what was ours." Something inside me cracked. "Ours?" I repeated. "Mine, Dad. I worked for it. I built this life while you..." His jaw tightened. "While I was what?" I swallowed hard. "While you wasted every opportunity you had. While I worked myself to the bone so I wouldn't end up like us?" He finished for me. His voice was cold now, his eyes sharp. My mother reached for my arm. "Lucas, we needed it. We had to." "You had to?" My own voice didn't even sound like mine anymore. "You didn't even ask me. You just took it." My dad shook his head. "You owe us." I stared at him, my stomach twisting. I owe you? We raised you. We fed you. We gave you everything, he said, his voice rising. And now that you've made it, you're really going to turn your back on us? That was your job as parents, I said, my hands curling into fists at my sides. And this was mine. My mother's voice wavered. We are struggling, Lucas. What kind of son turns his back on his own family? The weight of her words hit me like a freight train. But then, beneath all the guilt, all the manipulation, something else cut through the noise. Clarity. I had worked my whole life to prove I was different. To prove I could build something better. To escape the cycle. And now, standing there, staring at the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, I realized something. I was just their investment, a paycheck they had been waiting to cash. And now, I wasn't sure what hurt more. The betrayal. Or the fact that I had seen it coming all along. I felt the weight of the moment settle deep in my chest, pressing against my ribs like a slow, suffocating grip. The air between us was thick, heavy with unspoken truths I wasn't ready to face. My mother was still watching me, her eyes pleading, her hands clutching the napkin in her lap like it was the only thing grounding her. My father, on the other hand, just stared at me with something I couldn't quite place. Disappointment? Resentment? Or was it just the same cold indifference I had been pretending not to notice my whole life? Zach, as usual, seemed detached, more interested in whatever was on his screen than the fact that our family was quietly imploding at a table meant for celebration. I reached for my glass of water, but my hand was unsteady. I set it down before I embarrassed myself. Lucas, my mother tried again, her voice softer this time, the way it used to be when I was a child and she wanted something from me. You know we wouldn't have done this if we had a choice. I exhaled slowly, carefully, like I could somehow breathe out the anger threatening to boil over. You had a choice, I said, keeping my voice low. You could have asked me. You could have told me you needed help. You didn't have to steal from me. She flinched at the word steal, her shoulders drawing in slightly like I had struck her. Don't say it like that. My father's expression darkened. That's not what this is. Then what is it? I challenged myself. He leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. You don't get it, do you? His voice was laced with something sharp, something accusatory. We sacrificed everything for you. The least you could do is give back. I swallowed, forcing myself to stay calm. You didn't give me anything, I said, my voice quieter now, but somehow heavier. I worked for this. I built this. And you didn't even think twice about taking it from me. My father scoffed. Listen to yourself. Talking like some Wall Street hotshot who thinks he's better than the people who raised him. It's not about being better, I shot back. It's about respect. My mother's voice cracked as she leaned in. We are your family, Lucas. This is what family does. No, I said, shaking my head. This is what you do. She inhaled sharply, like I had slapped her. I felt Martin's presence beside me again, silent but unwavering. He hadn't spoken since his last remark, but I knew he was still watching, still waiting. His presence alone was a reminder of what kind of person I wanted to be, the kind who didn't let people take advantage of him. The kind of person I was trying to be. I glanced around the restaurant, suddenly aware of how public this was. Some of my coworkers were still at the table, pretending not to listen, sipping their drinks as if that would make the tension less suffocating. Others had wandered off, sensing the shift in the air. I rubbed my temples, my pulse still hammering in my ears. $20,000. Gone, and they weren't even sorry. You've changed, my dad said suddenly, his voice filled with something like disgust. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Yeah. I have. His mouth twisted, but he didn't say anything. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the floor. The sound cut through the air like a knife. My mother reached for my arm, desperate now. Wait, I pulled back before she could touch me. Her lips trembled, but I didn't let it shake me. Not this time. Because for the first time in my life, I saw it for what it really was. This wasn't about love. This wasn't about family. This was about control. And I wasn't going to be their investment anymore. I walked away from the table, my mind racing, my pulse hammering in my ears. Behind me, I could hear my mother calling my name, her voice wavering between anger and desperation. My father stayed silent, and I didn't need to turn around to know he was watching me walk away with that same damn look of disappointment he had always reserved for me, like I was the problem, like I had failed them. But I wasn't the one who had failed. I stepped out onto the rooftop balcony, needing air. The Chicago skyline stretched out before me, a sprawling, glittering reminder of the life I had built for myself. I gripped the railing, grounding myself, forcing my breath to slow. $20,000. They had taken 20 grand from me without a second thought. And what hurt the most wasn't the money itself. It was the fact that they expected it. Like I was nothing more than a walking bank account. Martin stepped out beside me, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. He had always been good at that, watching, calculating, waiting for the right moment to say something. "They're not going to stop," he said simply. I didn't respond right away. Because I knew he was right. This wasn't the first time they had pulled something like this. The guilt trips, the emotional manipulation, the constant expectation that I would owe them something just for existing. But this time was different. This time, I had something to lose. And I wasn't about to let them take anything else from me. I turned to him. "I want to make sure they can't touch a cent of my money ever again." Martin nodded, unsurprised. "Already taken care of." I looked at him, eyebrows raised. He smirked. "You think I was going to let my new VP get bled dry by his own family?" He clapped me on the shoulder. "Your accounts are secure. They won't be able to access a dime." Relief washed over me, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Because this wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about making them understand. A plan started forming in my mind, piece by piece, clicking together like the gears of a well-oiled machine. I turned back to the city lights, the anger settling into something sharper. More focused. If they wanted to treat me like an investment, fine. But they were about to learn what happened when you burned your biggest investor. The next morning, I made the first call. "Hey, Scott," I said, leaning back in my office chair, my voice calm, measured. "I need you to take a deep dive into my parents' finances." Scott, my company's top forensic accountant, didn't even hesitate. "Looking for something specific?" "Anything that could come back to bite them," I said, staring out the window at the bustling streets below. "Unpaid debts, shady dealings, loans they never paid back. I need to know everything." Scott let out a low whistle. "Got it. Give me a few days." I hung up and dialed the next number. "Hey, Lisa," I said, my tone casual. "I need a favor." Lisa was a private investigator I had worked with a few times in the past, sharp as a knife and twice as deadly. "Who's the target?" she asked, cutting straight to the point. "My parents," I said simply. A pause. Then a soft chuckle. "Oof. That's a new one." I smirked. "Find out what they've been up to. Where they spend their money. Who they owe." "You got it," she said. "This is gonna be fun." It didn't take long for the dirt to surface. Turns out, my father had more than just medical bills draining his pockets. He had outstanding gambling debts all over the city, money owed to people who didn't take kindly to being ignored. My mother? She had taken out loans in my name, using my social security number. She had been doing it for years, little by little, assuming I'd never notice. But the real kicker? They had refinanced their house, the house I grew up in, to cover their reckless spending. And now, they were months away from defaulting. Which meant I had options. I waited until everything was lined up. Until all the pieces were in place. Then I made my move. The first domino to fall was their bank accounts. With a few well-placed calls, their credit was frozen, their assets locked. My mother woke up one morning to find her cards declined at the grocery store. My father couldn't pull cash from the ATM. Panic set in fast. Then came the debt collectors. I made sure every single person my father owed money to knew exactly where to find him. The calls started pouring in, demanding payment. But without access to my accounts, he had nothing left to give. And finally, the house. The bank had been circling for months, waiting for an excuse. I gave them one. With the right paperwork in the right hands, the foreclosure process sped up overnight. Within weeks, my parents were served with an eviction notice. They tried to call me. Again and again. First, it was my mother, sobbing into the phone, begging me to help them. Then my father, furious, demanded to know what I had done. "You ruined us," he shouted, his voice shaking with rage. I smiled coldly, holding the phone to my ear. "No, Dad," I said. "You ruined yourself." The silence on the other end was delicious. They had taken from me without remorse, without hesitation. They had treated me like a bottomless ATM, assuming I would always be there to clean up their mess. They were wrong. When the day finally came, when the bank took their house and they had nowhere left to go, I received one final call. "We have nothing left," my mother whispered, her voice hollow. "Lucas, please. We're your family." I let the silence stretch before answering. "So was my money," I said. Then I hung up. And I never looked back.
الغنوة اللي جاية دي حضراتكم هقولوها معايا يعني انتوا ورغبتكم، بس انتوا اول ما هتسمعوها هتعرفوا. انما انا عايز اقول لكم هي كلمات مين. هي كلمات الدكتور مدحت العدل والحان خالد حماد وتوزيعه برضه. هنغنيه اول ما تسمعوا الدخول، هتغنوا معانا على طول.